The October morning in Manhattan began with the kind of rain that seemed to wash the entire city in shades of gray. Sophia Martinez pulled her thin jacket tighter as she hurried down Fifth Avenue, clutching a worn leather portfolio against her, chest like a shield. At 26, she had learned that dreams required more than hope. They demanded action, persistence, and sometimes a miracle. Her community center, Rainbow Bridge, sat in the heart of Brooklyn, serving children who had been forgotten by a system that promised everything and delivered little. For 3 years, Sophia had poured her heart into creating a safe space where kids could discover their talents through art therapy, basic computer skills, and mentorship programs. But tonight, she might lose it all. The meeting with the Whitman Foundation represented her last chance. Their grant program funded exactly the kind of work she did, and their offices occupied the 32nd floor of a gleaming tower that made her feel small just looking up at it. Sophia checked her watch. 15 minutes to convince some of the wealthiest people in New York that poor kids deserved a chance at greatness. Rain drummed harder against the sidewalk, creating streams that rushed toward storm drains already overwhelmed by the downpour. Sophia quickened her pace, imagining the faces of the children who depended on her. Tommy, the 12-year-old coding genius who had learned programming on their ancient computers. Luna, whose paintings transformed pain into beauty with every brushstroke. Diego, who could build robots from recycled materials and see possibilities where others saw trash. The man in the machine, Leonardo Romano, sat in the back seat of his custom Bentley, staring at his phone screen without really seeing the stock reports scrolling past. At 32, he controlled a tech empire worth billions, but today felt like the walls were closing in around his perfectly ordered world. The board meeting had been brutal. His cousin Ricardo had made his intentions clear. Marriage or merger, stability or surrender. Traditional investors want family men, Ricardo had said with that smug smile Leonardo despised. They want someone who understands commitment, responsibility, the value of legacy, not a bachelor who changes girlfriends like he changes watches. The rain pelted against bulletproof windows as Leonardo's driver navigated through traffic that moved like thick syrup. He had built Romano Industries from the ground up, transforming his grandfather's small electronics repair shop into a global technology powerhouse. Every decision, every sacrifice, every sleepless night had been worth it. Until now, his phone buzzed with a call from Professor Edmund Hayes, his old MIT mentor who had become like a father figure after Leonardo's parents died in a car accident 10 years ago. The professor's voice carried the warmth of genuine concern when Leonardo answered. "Leo, my boy, you sound terrible. How did the board meeting go?" Leonardo rubbed his temples where a headache was building. "About as well as expected. Ricardo has them convinced that a married CEO is a better CEO. Apparently, my dedication to the company means nothing if I don't have a wife to prove I can commit to something." Professor Hayes chuckled softly. "You know, your grandmother always said that love finds us when we least expect it, usually when we need it most. Love is a luxury I can't afford right now, Professor. I need a solution, not sentiment." "Sometimes they're the same thing, Leonardo. Sometimes they're exactly the same thing." The collision of two worlds. Leonardo ended the call as his car approached. The intersection where his world would collide with Sophia's in the most unexpected way. His driver had been trying to navigate around a double-parked delivery truck when a pedestrian stepped into the crosswalk without looking. The driver swerved sharply to avoid the accident, sending the heavy vehicle directly through a massive puddle that had formed near the curb. The wave of dirty water rose like a tsunami, catching Sophia completely off guard as she checked her watch one final time. The cold shock hit her like a physical blow, soaking through her carefully chosen blazer, her best dress, and the portfolio containing 3 years of documentation about Rainbow Bridge's impact on the community. For a moment, Time seemed suspended. Sophia stood frozen, water dripping from her dark hair, her presentation materials floating in the gutter like broken dreams. Then fury ignited in her chest, burning away the cold and shock. She marched toward the Bentley, which had stopped a few yards ahead. Through the tinted rear window, she could see the outline of a man in an expensive suit, apparently unbothered by the chaos he had caused. Her heels clicked against wet pavement as she approached the car with the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. The fire meets. Ice Leonardo noticed the commotion outside his window just as an angry face appeared pressed against the glass. The woman was soaked, furious, and absolutely magnificent in her rage. Her green eyes blazed with an intensity that cut through his usual detachment like a laser through fog. She was pounding on his window, demanding he face her. Against his driver's protests, Leonardo lowered the window halfway. "Miss, I'm sorry about the water, but you shouldn't have been standing so close to the curb in this weather." "Standing so close to the curb?" Sophia's voice rose above the sound of rain and traffic. "You just ruined my presentation, my clothes, and possibly my entire future because your driver doesn't know how to avoid puddles." Leonardo found himself studying her face, noting how her anger made her even more beautiful. "I can compensate you for dry cleaning or whatever replacement clothes you need. You think money fixes everything, don't you?" Sophia reached down and picked up a small stone from the sidewalk. "Let me show you how it feels to have something precious damaged by someone who doesn't care." The rock struck his window with a sharp crack, creating a spider web of fractures across the expensive glass. Leonardo stared at the damage, then at the woman who had caused it, feeling something stir in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. Surprise, respect, interest. The witness. From across the street, Professor Edmund Hayes watched the entire scene unfold with growing fascination. He had been leaving his favorite bookshop when the collision occurred, and something about the interaction between the soaked young woman and his stubborn former student captured his complete attention. He observed how Leonardo actually got out of his car, something the professor had never seen him do during a business dispute. He watched the woman stand her ground despite being outmatched in every material way. Most intriguingly, he saw something pass between them in that moment of connection, recognition, perhaps, or possibility. The professor had been worried about Leonardo for years. Success had isolated him, turned him into someone who viewed every relationship as a transaction. But this woman, this fierce stranger, had managed to crack his armor in 30 seconds. She had made him feel something real. As the woman gathered the soggy remains of her presentation and walked away with her dignity intact, Professor Hayes made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. He followed her at a respectful distance, watching as she entered the Whitman Foundation building despite her disheveled appearance. Seeds of destiny. The Whitman Foundation meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. Sophia, still damp and clearly flustered, tried her best to present Rainbow Bridge's mission and impact. But the Foundation board members, accustomed to polished presentations and perfect appearances, struggled to see past her bedraggled state to the passion in her words. "Miss Martinez," the Foundation director said gently, "we appreciate your dedication, but we need to fund organizations that project stability and professionalism. Perhaps you could reapply next year when you're better prepared." Sophia left the building feeling hollow, carrying rejection like a weight in her chest. She had 30 days to find funding or watch Rainbow Bridge close forever. 30 days to find a miracle. Meanwhile, Leonardo returned to his office, unable to concentrate, on the quarterly reports spread across his desk. The image of green eyes blazing with righteous anger kept interfering with his thoughts. He found himself wondering about the woman's story, about what had been so important that getting soaked had devastated her so completely. Professor Hayes spent the afternoon making phone calls and conducting research. By evening, he knew everything. About Sophia Martinez, Rainbow Bridge, and the extraordinary work she was doing with underprivileged children. He also knew exactly how to solve two problems with one elegant solution. Love, he had always believed, was simply chemistry waiting for the right catalyst. And sometimes, the best catalysts came disguised as impossible situations that forced people to discover who they really were beneath all their protective layers. As night fell over Manhattan, 3 people went to sleep with their lives about, to change forever, though only one of them knew it. The plan takes shape. The next morning brought clear skies and the kind of crisp autumn air that made New York feel full of possibilities. Professor Hayes sat in his study, surrounded by books and memories, crafting what he privately called his masterpiece. Leonardo would arrive soon for their weekly chess game, and Sophia Martinez would receive a very interesting phone call about a potential donor for her community center. The professor smiled as he moved chess pieces around the board, setting up problems that would require creative solutions. In his 8 decades of life, he had learned that the most beautiful outcomes often emerged from the most impossible circumstances. Love, like chess, was a game of strategy, patience, and the courage to sacrifice something valuable for something precious. He thought about Leonardo's grandmother, Rosa Romano, who had been his dear friend before she passed. Rosa had always insisted that her grandson needed someone who could see through his wealth to the man underneath, someone who would challenge him to be better than he believed possible. Edmund, she had said shortly before her death, promise me you'll help him find someone real, someone who will love him for his heart, not his bank account. The professor had made that promise, and today he would begin to keep it. The call that changes everything. Sophia was teaching an art therapy session when her phone rang. Luna was working on a painting of her dream house, complete with a garden, where her mother could grow flowers instead of working 3 jobs to pay rent. The child's concentration was absolute, her small tongue poking out slightly as she mixed colors on her palette. "Miss Sophia," Luna said without looking up from her canvas, "do you think dreams come true if you paint them?" "I think dreams come true when you believe in them enough to work for them, sweetheart. Painting them is just the first step." The phone rang again, and Sophia reluctantly answered, expecting another rejection or bill collector. Instead, she heard the cultured voice of an elderly gentleman who introduced himself as Professor Edmund Hayes. "Miss Martinez, I understand you're doing remarkable work with children in your community. I have a proposition that might interest you. Something that could secure Rainbow Bridge's future permanently. Would you be available to meet this afternoon?" Sophia's heart jumped. After yesterday's disaster, she had almost given up hope of finding a benefactor willing to invest in her vision. "Of course, Professor Hayes. Where would you like to meet?" "There's a small cafe called The Painted Cup in Greenwich Village." "Do you know it?" Sophia knew it well. The cafe supported local artists by displaying their work on the walls and hosting poetry readings on weekends. It felt like a sign. "I'll be there at 3 o'clock. "Excellent. And Miss Martinez, please don't be surprised if our conversation takes some unexpected turns. The best solutions often do." As Sophia hung up, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Pure, irrational, beautiful hope that maybe, just maybe, Rainbow Bridge would survive to help another generation of children discover their potential. She had no way of knowing that across town, Leonardo Romano was about to receive a call that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, business, and the price of both. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the Painted Cup, illuminating watercolor paintings that local artists had hung with hope and desperation. Sophia arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a corner table, where she could observe the eclectic mix of students, writers, and dreamers who made the cafe their second home. Her hands trembled slightly as she ordered a lavender latte, wondering what kind of proposition could possibly save Rainbow Bridge. Professor Edmund Hayes entered with the quiet dignity of someone who had spent decades in academic halls. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, his tweed jacket spoke of old-world elegance, and his walking cane was more accessory than necessity. But his eyes held a warmth that immediately put Sophia at ease. "Miss Martinez, thank you for meeting me on such short notice." He settled into the chair across from her, placing his cane against the table. "I trust you found the location suitable." "It's perfect," Sophia replied, genuinely meaning it. "This cafe has always felt like home to me. The artists here understand what it means to create something meaningful with limited resources." Professor Hayes smiled, his expression suggesting he knew exactly what she meant. "Before we discuss business, may I ask about your work at Rainbow Bridge? What drives someone so young to dedicate themselves to helping others?" Sophia's face lit up as she spoke about her mission. "I grew up in foster care, Professor Hayes. I know what it feels like to be invisible, to have adults look right through you as if you don't matter. When I aged out of the system, I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would create a place where every child feels seen, valued, and capable of greatness. And you've succeeded admirably. I've done my research, Miss Martinez. Rainbow Bridge has helped dozens of children discover talents they never knew they possessed. Tommy Rivera's coding skills, Luna Vasquez's artistic abilities, Diego Santos's engineering mind. These children are thriving because of your vision." Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes. Someone had actually noticed their work, understood its importance. "They're extraordinary kids, Professor. They just needed someone to believe in them." The proposition unfolds. Professor Hayes leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "Which brings me to my proposition. I have a solution that could provide Rainbow Bridge with permanent funding, enough to expand your programs, hire additional staff, and serve hundreds more children over the coming decades." Sophia's heart raced. "What kind of solution?" "A rather unconventional one, I'm afraid. It involves a young man I've known since he was 18, brilliant, successful, but tragically isolated by his own achievements. He needs something real in his life, someone who can see past his wealth to the person he truly is." Sophia frowned, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "I'm not sure I understand." Professor Hayes pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. Sophia's breath caught as she recognized the face immediately. It was the man from yesterday's incident, the arrogant billionaire who had ruined her presentation. "Leonardo Romano," the professor said quietly. "My former student, and in many ways, the son I never had. He's facing a crisis that threatens everything he's worked to build. His company's board of directors wants him replaced because they view him as unstable, unreliable. They believe a married man makes better business decisions." "Professor Hayes, if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, the answer is absolutely not. I don't know this man, and what little I've seen of him tells me we have nothing in common. On the contrary, Miss Martinez, you both dedicate your lives to helping others reach their potential. You simply work with different populations. Leonardo has mentored dozens of young entrepreneurs, funded scholarship programs, and revolutionized educational technology. But he's forgotten how to connect with people on a human level." Sophia shook her head firmly. "I'm not interested in being part of some matchmaking scheme." The stakes become clear. Professor Hayes reached into his jacket and withdrew a check that made Sophia's eyes widen. The amount was more money than Rainbow Bridge had seen in its entire existence. $5 million, he said calmly. "Enough to purchase your building, renovate your facilities, create an endowment that would fund operations indefinitely, and establish scholarship programs for your most gifted students." Sophia stared at the check, her mind racing. $5 million would transform not just Rainbow Bridge, but the lives of every child who walked through their doors. What exactly would I have to do? Marry Leonardo Romano. Not for love, at least not initially, but for mutual benefit. You would help him present the image of stability his board requires, and he would ensure that your work continues and expands beyond your wildest dreams. That's insane, Sophia whispered. You can't just arrange marriages like some medieval matchmaker. Professor Hayes chuckled softly. My dear, I've spent 50 years studying human behavior. I've seen how the right circumstances can reveal people's true natures. Yesterday, when Leonardo's car splashed you, something happened between you both. I witnessed it. What happened was that he showed his true colors, arrogant, dismissive, completely out of touch with how ordinary people live. And yet he got out of his car to speak with you personally. In 10 years of knowing him, I've never seen Leonardo leave his vehicle during a street incident. You intrigued. Him, Miss Martinez. More than that, you challenged him. Tommy's dream, as if summoned by fate, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from Tommy Rivera. Miss Sophia, can you help me apply for the coding camp at MIT? The deadline is tomorrow, but I need a recommendation letter and the application fee. Sophia's heart sank as she read the message. The coding camp cost $3,000. Money Rainbow Bridge simply didn't have. Tommy's talent was extraordinary, but talent meant nothing without opportunity. Professor Hayes, who had been watching her expression, asked gently, Bad news? One of my kids wants to apply for a summer coding program at MIT. He's brilliant, Professor Hayes. He could be the next great innovator in technology, but the application fee alone is more than our monthly budget allows. And if you had adequate funding, you could send him. I could send him and 20 others like him. Luna could attend art school, Diego could go to engineering camp, Maria could take advanced mathematics courses. Sophia's voice broke slightly. These children have so much potential, but potential dies without opportunity. Professor Hayes placed the check on the table between them. One conversation with Leonardo Romano. That's all I ask. Meet him, talk to him as two adults discussing a mutually beneficial arrangement. If after that meeting you decide the idea is impossible, I'll find another way to help Rainbow Bridge. Leonardo's dilemma across town. Leonardo sat in his corner office, staring at financial projections that should have thrilled him. Romano Industries was positioned for unprecedented growth, but none of it would matter if the board voted him out at next week's meeting. His secretary had been fielding calls all morning from board members and major investors, all expressing concerns about his leadership style. When Professor Hayes called asking to meet immediately, Leonardo felt grateful for any distraction. From his mounting problems, Leo, my boy, we need to talk urgently. Can you meet me at the Painted Cup in Greenwich Village? Professor, I have 3 board calls scheduled this afternoon. Can't we discuss whatever this is over the phone? This concerns your future with Romano Industries, and it requires a face-to-face conversation. Trust me, Leonardo. When have I ever steered you wrong? An hour later, Leonardo found himself in the Bohemian Cafe, feeling completely out of place among the artists and students. He spotted Professor Hayes immediately, but was surprised to see a young woman sitting across from him. As he approached their table, recognition hit him like a physical blow. It was her, the woman from yesterday, the one who had thrown a rock at his car and haunted his thoughts ever since, the confrontation. You? Sophia said, standing abruptly as Leonardo reached their table. This is your great solution, Professor Hayes. The man who destroyed my presentation and probably cost me my funding. Leonardo, equally shocked, turned to his mentor. Professor, what exactly is going on here? Sit down, both of you, Professor, Hayes said with gentle authority, and let me explain how you can solve each other's problems. Reluctantly, both Sophia and Leonardo took their seats, eyeing each other warily across the small table. Leonardo, meet Sophia Martinez, director of Rainbow Bridge Community Center. Sophia, meet Leonardo Romano, CEO of Romano Industries and one of the most innovative minds in technology. We've met, Sophia said coolly. Indeed you have, and that meeting revealed something important about both of you. Sophia, you saw a man who needed to be held accountable for his actions. Leonardo, you encountered someone who wouldn't be intimidated by your status or wealth. Leonardo found himself studying Sophia's face in the afternoon light. Yesterday's fury had been replaced by wariness, but her green eyes still held that same fierce intelligence that had captivated him. Professor Hayes has an interesting proposition, Sophia said, her voice carefully neutral. He thinks we should get married to solve our respective problems. Leonardo nearly choked on his coffee. He thinks we should what? The business case Professor Hayes launched into his explanation with the precision of someone who had thought through every angle. He outlined Leonardo's board situation, Sophia's funding crisis, and how a marriage between them could address both issues while creating opportunities neither could achieve alone. Think of it as a merger, the professor concluded. Two organizations combining resources for mutual benefit. Except marriages aren't business deals, Sophia protested. Aren't they? Leonardo asked quietly, surprising himself. Most marriages fail because people have unrealistic expectations about love conquering all practical considerations. But a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals might actually have a better chance of success. Sophia stared at him, startled by his thoughtful response. You're seriously considering this? I'm considering all options. My board meets in 6 days to vote on my replacement. If I show up married to someone they respect, someone with her own accomplishments and values, it might buy me the time I need to prove my leadership abilities. And what would I get out of this arrangement, besides funding for Rainbow Bridge? Leonardo met her gaze directly. The resources to expand your impact beyond anything you've imagined. Romano Industries has educational technology divisions, scholarship programs, connections to universities and foundations worldwide. You could transform not just Rainbow Bridge, but create a model that could be replicated in communities across the country. The children's voices as they talked. Sophia's phone buzzed with messages from the children at Rainbow Bridge. Luna had sent a photo of her latest painting. Diego had shared a video of his newest invention made from cardboard and old electronics. Tommy had forwarded an article about young entrepreneurs changing the world through technology. They're remarkable, Leonardo said, glancing at the messages. How do you do it? How do you help them believe in possibilities when everything around them suggests those possibilities don't exist for kids like them? Sophia's expression softened slightly. I remind them every day that where they come from doesn't determine where they're going, that their circumstances are temporary, but their potential is limitless. And you've been doing this work for how long? 3 years officially, but I've been volunteering with at-risk youth since college. Leonardo nodded slowly. I funded a similar program in Chicago 2 years ago. Inner-city kids learning coding and entrepreneurship skills. The success rate was incredible, but the program shut down when the local organizer burned out and couldn't find replacement funding. That's exactly what I'm trying to prevent. These children deserve stability, consistency. They need to know that someone believes in them long-term, not just until the grant money runs out. The moment of decision. Professor Hayes watched the subtle shift in both their attitudes as they discussed the children and their shared commitment to education. The hostility was fading, replaced by professional respect and genuine interest in each other's perspectives. I have a proposal, Leonardo said suddenly. What if we tried this arrangement for a limited time? 6 months. Long enough for me to stabilize my position at Romano Industries and for you to see how far we could expand Rainbow Bridge's impact with unlimited resources. 6 months of pretending to be married. 6 months of being legally married, but with clear boundaries and expectations. Separate living arrangements, public appearances as needed, and complete transparency about the business nature of our relationship. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Tommy's coding camp application, Luna's artistic potential, Diego's inventive mind, and the dozens of other children whose futures hung in the balance. Would I have complete autonomy over Rainbow Bridge's programs and expansion? Complete autonomy, with access to every resource Romano Industries could provide. And after 6 months. After 6 months, we evaluate. If the arrangement has served its purpose, we end it amicably. If we find that we work well together, we consider making it permanent. Professor Hayes smiled, recognizing the moment when two brilliant minds found common ground. So, do we have an agreement? Sophia looked at Leonardo, seeing something in his expression that hadn't been there yesterday. Respect, genuine interest, the beginning of understanding. We have an agreement, she said, extending her hand across the table. Partners. Leonardo shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip and the determination in her eyes. Partners. As they sealed their unlikely alliance, none of them could predict that what began as a business arrangement would evolve into something none of them had expected. Love, after all, had its own timeline, and it rarely consulted human plans. Setting the terms over the next 2 hours, they hammered out the details of their arrangement with the precision of experienced negotiators. Professor Hayes served as mediator, ensuring both parties felt heard and protected. The terms were straightforward. Legal marriage within the week, separate residences, joint public appearances as required for business purposes, and a clear timeline for evaluation and potential dissolution. But as the afternoon wore on, something unexpected began to happen. They started enjoying each other's company. Leonardo found himself genuinely impressed by Sophia's intelligence and passion. Her insights into child psychology and community development revealed a sophisticated understanding of human nature that rivaled anything he'd learned in business school. Sophia discovered that beneath Leonardo's polished exterior was someone who genuinely cared about using his resources to make a positive impact. His questions about Rainbow Bridge's programs showed real interest, not just polite conversation. By the time they left the Painted Cup, both were cautiously optimistic that their unusual partnership might actually work. They had no way of knowing that Professor Hayes had orchestrated far more than a business arrangement. He had planted the seeds of something much more dangerous and wonderful than either of them imagined. As twilight fell over Greenwich Village, 3 people walked away from a small cafe, carrying the weight of a decision that would change their lives forever. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. City Hall on a Thursday morning felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. Sophia stood before the judge, wearing a simple cream-colored dress she had bought the night before, holding a bouquet of sunflowers that Leonardo had surprised her with. The flowers reminded her of the children's artwork at Rainbow Bridge, bright and hopeful against any backdrop. Leonardo looked devastatingly handsome in his charcoal suit, but what struck Sophia most was the gentleness in his eyes as he spoke his vows. They had agreed on simple, traditional words, but when he promised to honor and cherish her, something in his voice made her heart skip unexpectedly. "You may kiss the bride," the judge announced, and for a moment, both of them froze. They had discussed this moment, agreed it would be brief and professional, but when Leonardo's lips touched hers, soft and warm and surprisingly tender, Sophia felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Professor Hayes stood as their witness, beaming, with satisfaction that went far beyond seeing his plan succeed. He recognized the look that passed between them after that kiss, the surprise and something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, or the first stirring of possibility. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Romano," the judge said warmly. "May your marriage bring you both happiness and fulfillment." As they walked down the courthouse steps, Leonardo offered Sophia his arm. "Well, Mrs. Romano, how does it feel to be married to a complete stranger?" "Strange," Sophia admitted, surprised, to find herself smiling. "But not as terrifying as I expected." Moving in the same circles, the first test of their arrangement came that very evening at a Romano Industries board dinner. Sophia had never attended such a formal event, and despite Leonardo's assurances that she would fit in perfectly, she felt nervous as they approached the elegant hotel ballroom. "Remember," Leonardo said quietly as they entered, "we're newlyweds who met through Professor Hayes. We fell in love over our shared passion for education and decided not to wait. Keep it simple and close to the truth." The board members were exactly what Sophia had expected. Older, wealthy, traditional men who evaluated her like a business acquisition. But she had spent years advocating for her children in front of skeptical bureaucrats and potential donors. She knew how to hold her ground. "Mrs. Romano," said Harold Whitfield, the board chairman, "your husband tells us you run some sort of community program." "I direct Rainbow Bridge Community Center," Sophia replied confidently. "We provide educational support and mentorship to underprivileged children, helping them develop skills in technology, arts, and critical thinking." "How admirable," said another board member, his tone suggesting it was anything but. "And you'll be giving that up now that you're married, of course?" Sophia felt Leonardo tense beside her, but she handled the question smoothly. "Actually, we're expanding the program. Leonardo and I share a commitment to education and providing opportunities for young people to reach their potential. Romano Industries will be partnering with Rainbow Bridge to create similar centers in other cities." The conversation that followed revealed something Sophia hadn't expected. Leonardo wasn't just playing along with her answers. He was building on them, sharing genuine enthusiasm for the expansion possibilities, discussing technology resources and funding strategies with the expertise of someone who had given the matter serious thought. By the end of the evening, the board members were nodding approvingly at their stable, family-oriented CEO and his impressive wife, who clearly shared his values and vision. The children's response. The real test came the next day when Sophia brought Leonardo to Rainbow Bridge for his first official visit as her husband. The children had heard she had gotten married and were bursting with curiosity about the mysterious man who had won their beloved Miss Sophia's heart. Tommy Rivera, now 13 and even more brilliant than before, looked up from his computer as they entered the technology lab. "So you're the guy who married Miss Sophia," he said with the directness that Sophia adored about him. "I am," Leonardo replied, matching the boy's serious tone. "And you must be Tommy. I've heard incredible things about your programming skills. Want to see what I'm working on?" Tommy asked, his wariness melting into excitement. For the next hour, Leonardo immersed himself completely in Tommy's world, asking technical questions that pushed the boy to explain his reasoning and methodology. Sophia watched in amazement as her husband demonstrated not just knowledge, but genuine teaching ability. "Miss Sophia," Tommy said during a break, "I like him. He talks to me like I'm smart, not like I'm just a kid who got lucky." Luna Vasquez was more cautious, observing Leonardo from across the art room as she worked on a new painting. Her latest piece depicted a garden where children of different ages and backgrounds worked together to grow beautiful flowers. "The garden represents community," she explained to Leonardo when he asked about her work. "Everyone contributes something different, but together they create beauty." Leonardo studied the painting with the attention he would give a masterpiece in a museum. "You understand something that many adults never learn, Luna. That diversity makes things stronger, not weaker." The little girl smiled, her approval harder won than Tommy's, but perhaps more meaningful. Ricardo's threat. The happiness of those first weeks was shattered when Leonardo's cousin Ricardo requested a private meeting. They met at Ricardo's corporate office, a space designed to intimidate with its stark modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that made visitors feel exposed. "Congratulations on your marriage, cousin," Ricardo said, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Though I must say the timing seems remarkably convenient." "What are you implying, Ricardo?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." "Ricardo, pulled out a folder thick with photographs and documents. Sophia Martinez, foster child, community activist, running a program on the verge of bankruptcy. You meet her exactly when you need a wife to save your position, and suddenly she's Mrs. Romano with access to unlimited funding for her little charity. Leonardo's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. My wife's work is hardly a charity. She's transforming lives and building futures for children who deserve every opportunity we can provide. How noble, Ricardo sneered. But the board might be interested to know that your marriage is nothing more than a business transaction. I have evidence, Leonardo. Witnesses who saw the meeting between you, your wife, and that meddling professor. Documentation of the funding transfers. Proof that your stable family man image is as fake as everything else about you. What do you want, Ricardo? Step down voluntarily. Announce that you want to spend more time with your new family, pursue philanthropic interests. I become CEO, and your secret stays safe. You and your purchased bride can play house without destroying the family reputation. Leonardo stood slowly, his control barely maintained. And if I refuse? Then next week's board meeting becomes very interesting. I wonder how your new wife will handle the scandal when everyone learns she married you for money. The confession. That evening, Leonardo found himself at Rainbow Bridge long after hours, sitting in the empty art room where Luna had shown him her garden painting. The weight of Ricardo's threat felt crushing, not because he feared losing his position, but because he couldn't bear the thought of Sophia being humiliated and the children losing their dreams. Sophia found him there an hour later, having come to collect materials for the next day's classes. Leonardo, what are you doing here so late? He looked up at her, and Sophia was startled to see genuine anguish in his expression. We need to talk. They walked through the quiet halls of Rainbow Bridge, past the children's artwork and achievement certificates, while Leonardo told her about Ricardo's ultimatum. Sophia listened without interruption, her heart sinking as she understood the impossible position they were in. So he knows, she said finally, about our arrangement. He knows enough to destroy us both. Sophia, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to be hurt by this. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the children sleeping safely in their beds, dreaming of futures that had seemed impossible before Leonardo entered their lives, thinking about Tommy's coding camp acceptance letter that had arrived that morning, about Luna's art scholarship opportunity, about Diego's invitation to a young inventor's workshop. What if we don't let him? She said suddenly. What do you mean? What if we stop pretending? What if we make this real? Leonardo stared at her, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. Sophia, you can't mean that. You can't sacrifice your future for a business deal. That's just it, Leonardo. It stopped, being just a business deal weeks ago. She took a deep breath, gathering courage for words she had never expected to say. I've fallen in love with you. The truth emerges. The confession hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to find. Leonardo reached for her hands, his touch gentle and reverent. I've been falling in love with you too, he said quietly, watching you with the children, seeing how you fight for them, how you believe in people's potential even when they don't believe in themselves. You've reminded me who I wanted to be before I got lost in board meetings and profit margins. When... Did you know? Sophia asked. The day Tommy showed me his latest program, you were working with Diego on his robot, and you started laughing at something he said. Your whole face lit up, and I realized I wanted to spend my life making you laugh like that. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. For me, it was during the board dinner. When you talked about expanding Rainbow Bridge, you weren't just supporting my cover story. You believed in it. You saw the same possibilities I did. They stood in the hallway where children's dreams decorated the walls, holding each other and letting the truth of their feelings settle around them like a blessing. So, what do we do about Ricardo? Sophia asked. Leonardo smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached his eyes completely. We tell him the truth. Our marriage started as a business arrangement, but it became something real. We have nothing to hide anymore. The board meeting. The Romano Industries boardroom had never seen drama like the confrontation that unfolded. The following week, Ricardo had prepared his presentation carefully, armed with photographs, documentation, and testimony from private investigators. Gentlemen, he announced to the assembled board members, I'm here to reveal the truth about Leonardo's convenient marriage. He laid out his evidence methodically, building the case that Leonardo had essentially purchased a wife to satisfy the board's concerns about stability. The room grew tense as Ricardo painted a picture of deception and manipulation. When he finished, Harold Whitfield turned to Leonardo with disappointment, clear in his expression. Is this true, Leonardo? Is your marriage a business arrangement? Leonardo stood, reaching for Sophia's hand as she rose beside him. The marriage began as a mutual agreement to solve our respective problems, yes, but it became something much more important than either of us expected. So you admit to deceiving this board, Ricardo said triumphantly. I admit to finding love in an unexpected place, Leonardo replied calmly. My wife and I may have met through unusual circumstances, but what we've built together is completely genuine. Sophia stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. Mr. Whitfield, gentlemen, I won't pretend that Leonardo and I had a traditional courtship, but I can tell you that in the past 2 months, I've watched him transform the lives of dozens of children. I've seen him invest not just money, but time, attention, and genuine care in helping young people reach their potential. If you question his character or his ability to make lasting commitments, I invite you to visit Rainbow Bridge and see the evidence for yourself. Tommy's testimony, as if summoned by Providence, the boardroom door opened and Tommy Rivera walked in, wearing his best clothes and carrying a laptop bag. Behind him came Luna, Diego, and a dozen other children from Rainbow Bridge, all dressed for the occasion. Excuse me, Tommy said with the confidence that comes from knowing you belong anywhere you choose to be. We heard there was some question about Mr. Leonardo's character, and we thought you should hear from people who actually know him. Harold Whitfield looked stunned, but gestured for the boy to continue. Mr. Leonardo doesn't just write checks for our programs, Tommy explained. He shows up, he asks questions, he challenges us to think bigger and reach higher. Last week, he spent 3 hours helping me debug a program that no one else could figure out. Not because he had to, but because he cared about my success. Luna stepped forward, her quiet voice carrying surprising authority. Mr. Leonardo looks at our artwork the same way he looks at important business papers. Like what we create matters. Like we matter. One by one, the children shared their experiences with Leonardo, painting a picture of a man who had rediscovered his purpose through service to others. The resolution, when the children finished their testimonies, the boardroom was silent, except for the sound of Harold Whitfield clearing his throat. Ricardo, he said finally, your investigation has revealed something important about Leonardo's character, but not what you intended. You've shown us a man who found love while solving problems creatively, who has demonstrated his commitment to community service, and who has earned the respect and affection of some very impressive young people. He turned to Leonardo and Sophia. Your marriage may have begun unconventionally, but the results speak for themselves. Romano Industries is more profitable than ever. Our community outreach programs have gained national recognition, and you've both shown exactly the kind of stability and vision we want in our leadership. Ricardo's face flushed with anger and defeat, but he had no response to the children's testimonies or the board's obvious approval. The board votes to confirm Leonardo Romano as CEO for another 5-year term, Harold announced. And we look forward to continuing our partnership with Rainbow Bridge as it expands to serve communities nationwide. The real beginning. That evening, Sophia and Leonardo sat on the roof garden of his penthouse apartment, which had become their shared home after they decided to make their marriage genuine. The city sparkled below them like scattered diamonds, and the future stretched ahead full of possibilities. "Do you ever regret it?" Leonardo asked, pulling her closer against the cool evening breeze. "Taking such a crazy chance on a stranger who splashed you with muddy water?" Sophia laughed, the sound carrying joy and wonder. "Never, though I do think we should send Professor Hayes a very expensive thank you gift. He already got what he wanted," Leonardo said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "He told me once that the best outcomes come from the most impossible circumstances." Wise man. Speaking of outcomes, I have something for you. Leonardo reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we're already married, but I wanted to do this properly." Inside the box was the most beautiful ring Sophia had ever seen, a vintage design with a center diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the city lights and threw them back like captured stars. "Sophia Martinez Romano," Leonardo said, dropping to one knee on their rooftop garden. "Will you marry me again, this time for all the right reasons? Will you be my partner in business, in love, and in changing the world one child at a time?" Through happy tears, Sophia said yes, knowing that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most unlikely encounters. Epilogue. 5 years later, Rainbow Bridge had grown into a network of 25 centers across the country, each one a beacon of hope in communities that had been forgotten by society. Tommy Rivera, now 18, had just been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship. Luna's artwork had been featured in a gallery show that raised funds for arts education. Diego's inventions had earned him recognition as one of the country's most promising young engineers. Leonardo and Sophia Romano had become one of the most influential couples in education philanthropy, but they never forgot the muddy water and thrown rock that had brought them together. They kept a small piece of that original stone on their desk as a reminder that love often arrives disguised as disaster, and the best partnerships are built on the courage to be authentic with each other. Professor Hayes, now 83 and still meddling in the lives of people he cared about, often visited Rainbow Bridge to watch the children whose futures had been transformed by his impossible plan. He had received many honors for his contributions to education, but his greatest pride came from watching two people discover that business arrangements could become love stories when the right hearts were involved. And in the art room at the original Rainbow Bridge Center, Luna's painting of the community garden still hung on the wall, reminding everyone who saw it that when different people work together with love and purpose, they can create beauty beyond anything they could achieve alone. The rain that had brought Sophia and Leonardo together had long since dried, but the growth it nurtured continued to flourish, touching lives and changing futures in ways none of them had ever imagined possible. Sometimes the most precious gifts come wrapped in the most unlikely packages. Sometimes strangers become soulmates, and business deals become love stories, and muddy water becomes the foundation for a lifetime of beautiful possibilities. In the end, it wasn't revenge that proved priceless. It was the love that grew from the courage to see beyond first impressions to the hearts beneath, and the willingness to take impossible chances on the promise of something real.